Welcome viewers, I am Dr. Tarang Kapoor and in the series of lectures on Introduction to Ethics, in this lecture we are going to visit care ethics. We have been discussing normative ethical theories. The objective of these ethical theories is to guide us to know and perform what is morally right and to avoid what is wrong. Care ethics is one of the significant moral normative ethic theory. Let us our discussion be today about understanding the term feminism first, because care ethics is deeply associated with this movement in particular. Now, feminism is defined as an intellectual commitment and a political movement that seeks justice for women and the end of sexism in all forms. Now, this definition is taken from Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and there are philosophers like bell hooks even who have spoken about feminism as a movement to end sexist oppression. Basically, it is about asserting equality and against discriminations of all sorts. In discussions on ethical theory, feminism intervenes as a critique of traditional approaches to ethics. So we have in the previous lectures gone through Immanuel Kant's approach, deontology, J.S. Mill's approach, utilitarianism, and Aristotle's approach, virtue theory. Feminism is offering us an intervention to criticize these one-sided approaches to ethics as they claim. The traditional approaches are primarily focused on values such as autonomy, impartiality, and neutrality. These values are seen by feminists as morally problematic, as they are patriarchal values, distinctly stressed by male-dominated culture, in as far as they downplay the importance of concrete, caring relationships. So, feminism offers a new intervention, I must say, to understand the value of human relationships. These caring relationships are related to private sphere or family life, those parts of life that are viewed as being feminine as opposed to the masculine or patriarchal public sphere, which asserts values like autonomy, among others. There are two kinds of discourses prominent in feminism. First kinds are those which are concerned with promoting women, equality with men, and those who want to raise the value of women's unique characteristics. Most well-known writers and activists have been those who have stressed women's rights and equality. Mary Wollstonecraft, in Vindication of the Rights of Women, has argued that women are not weak and emotional, but it is their social situation, the context in which they are situated, which makes them look vulnerable, which makes them weak and emotional. She insists that it is the society which has taught them negative moral traits. Many activists who demanded equality and rights to women followed Mary Wollstonecraft. The 19th century women rights advocates made the first wave of feminism. Now, progressively, Simone de Beauvoir presents a second sex book titled Second Sex, which came in 1949 and became a classical text for second wave feminism. She argued that women are a second sex because they are always regarded in terms of being another to the first sex, which is the primary male sex. She was an existentialist philosopher and argued that there is a need for women to be having their own independent selves, free to establish their own goals, their own projects, and their own life. Various writers in the history of women's movement stressed the importance of raising women's consciousness so that they might understand how does women's experience shaped by cultural and social norms. This involves helping women become aware of how certain social circumstances leave them in a socially second-class status. While encouraging women to examine the various ways They have been oppressed and subordinated in their personal, professional, political lives. The movement raises consciousness, awareness, and also brings about political equality of women. Now, the third wave developed since 1990s, and this is a more recent kind of phenomena, has been aware of the problem of diversity in dealing with women's issues, which was the concern of the second wave. This includes the range of women experiences in diverse cultures, issues which would be different in different parts of the world, depending on the religious sphere, cultural and even geographical locations, generational differences. Women in the Western world who are concerned with liberty and equality for women in the rest of the world are more aware of the need to listen to women and appreciate their unique cultural situations. So the third wave was talking in terms of accommodation of true diversity, in terms of culture, economy, society, religion, and other kinds of diverse factors. Let us look at Martha Nussbaum's work. Martha Nussbaum remarks that the cultures are dynamic and internally complex. Nonetheless, she thinks that it is still important to clarify abstract moral principles, provided that they are grounded in empirical reality. So, the concern in Martha Nussbaum is also to acknowledge the empirical, the real, social and the cultural milieu in which women are situated. So she explains that although feminist philosophy has often been skeptical of universal normative moral approaches like that of Immanuel Kant and others who have offered this neutral autonomous agent as the ethical agent, feminism can make universal claims. Even feminism can do those and make those claims, and this needs to be claim, and that this claim need not be insensitive to difference or imperialistic in nature. Nussbaum's own work dealing with gender issues in India has exemplified the approach that she has championed. She argues that all kinds of criticisms must be grounded in local practices, and they must be based on needs and interests of the women who are actually living in that form of life, and they have to be characterized by the specifics of the local context. So clearly, this whole idea of common sense philosophy, where we are acknowledging the contextual underpinnings of a person who is situated in a particular milieu. Feminists have done a critique of abstract moral principles. It is widely known. These are concerned with complex gender terms and sexuality. Somebody like Judith Butler, associated with third wave of feminism, and she is a post-structuralist philosopher who has questioned traditional norms for thinking about gender and sexuality, as they liberate gender and sexuality for strict social conventions. This feminist moral thought may be said to advance a feminist ethics. International and cross-cultural work requires sensitivity and awareness of the problems of cultural relativism and gender diversity. There is another pertinent critique of feminism. So we have seen the work of Martha Nussbaum and Judith Butler, who are talking about this kind of fleshing out the cultural and the social milieu to develop a better international understanding of the feminist cause. But what are the other pertinent criticisms which argue that traditional philosophy is among the causes of women's oppression itself? It is the traditional way of doing philosophy, the traditional way of understanding the nature of human agency, which has caused much damage to the women position. Traditional moral philosophy has not been favorable to women. It has tended to support the view that women should develop women-centric virtues such as modesty, humility, subservience, which are detrimental to actual cause of women. For example, a philosopher like Aristotle seems to have held that women are inferior to men not only because of certain biological phenomena, but also because they lack certain elements of rationality. So the way they define a rational person sidelines women from the definition. According to him, free adult males could rule over slaves, women and children because of their weaknesses in their deliberative faculties. So, women lack the deliberation faculty. In the case of women, which they have, while women have such a faculty, Aristotle claims that it is without any authority. Psychologists like Carol Gilligan, whose work we are going to refer again and again in our lecture, has done revolutionary work, and she has put the debate about sex or gender differences in moral perspectives and moral reasoning. How the debate on gender helps form our moral reasoning, moral perspective, and how this moral perspective then goes on to define how we understand a feminine discourse. Such experiments she follows up on Kohlberg, a very famous psychologist, on his experiments. Now, she interviewed both male and female subjects about various moral dilemmas and found that the females she had interviewed had a different view than the male participants on what was morally required in each case. They used different moral language to explain themselves, and their reasoning involved a different kind of reasoning in comparison to their male counterparts for giving some moral logic. So Gilligan concluded males and females have different kinds of ethics. Gilligan criticized the dominant Kantian tradition in philosophy, which has also been criticized by other philosophers like Bernard Williams, MacIntyre, Philippa Foot, and several others, but for different reasons. So Gilligan has presented a feminist critique of Kantian traditional philosophy. Her book is to interest as much for its attempt to articulate an alternative to the Kantian justice perspective, as much as it is for interest of its implicit raising of the question of male bias in the Western moral theory, especially liberal democratic theory. Annette Baer's work is also a relevant work alongside Gilligan's work, because she provides a critique of the traditional emphasis on justice as a moral norm that is derived from her reading of Gilligan's work on moral development. So Baer believes that the best moral theory has to be a cooperative product of women and men. It has to harmonize justice as well as care. So if the feminine side is bringing in care as a perspective and a male side is bringing justice as a key virtue, then a best theory will be to combine the two, the best of the both worlds, and the morality theories about all persons for men and women, and will need their combined insights. Now the question is whether there is a distinctively feminine morality at all. So are we going to say that, there is male morality and then there is a female morality? Another significant question also occurs at whether the idea that there is a female approach to ethics helps or hinders the cause of reducing violence against women. So if we say that there is a different, unique, distinct ethics of the feminine, how is that helping us to put forth the feminine cause, or is it offering a hindrance to the feminine cause, because then it is essentializing the nature of women? And whether this kind of an articulation of a theory helps or hinders the effort to promote liberty and equality for women. So if this articulation is worthy and it is socially just, then will women's right and their sphere have a better assertion? These are some of the pertinent questions which need to be dealt with. To understand the above questions, let us understand the foundations of gender in moral reasoning and the ethics of care. In Gilligan's studies conducted in 1970s, a hypothetical situation was posed to two 11-year-old children. How she understand the moral reasoning and alongside the ethics of care in terms of how do you articulate the whole question of gender. So two set of hypothetical situational questions were posed to 11-year-old children, Jake and Amy. A man's wife was extremely ill and in danger of dying. A certain drug might save the wife, but the man could not afford the drug because man is poor. in part because the druggist had set an unreasonable high price, so the man was poor to be able to procure the drug. The question was whether the man should go ahead and steal the drug. Now, Jake, a male candidate, answered by trying to figure out the relative value of women's life and the druggist's right to his own property, that is, saving the drug. So, whether, the husband should try to procure the drug in terms of what is the value of wife for the husband, and then druggist owes the drug, so how much right does a druggist has over his own property. He concluded that man should steal the drug because he calculated that the woman's life was worth more in comparison to owner's right over the drug. Now, Amy, a female respondent, was not so sure. She wondered what would happen to both the man and the wife if he stole the drug. If the man goes ahead and stole the drug, he might save his wife. But if he did, he might have to go to jail because he has stolen the drug. And then his wife might get sicker again because she is deprived of the drug. So that's why Amy said that if husband and wife talked about this, they might be able to think of some other way to resolve the dilemma. Maybe go and seek public help, maybe go and seek some agency's help and resolve this problem, because clearly stealing the drug is not going to lead anywhere. One interesting thing about this case is that there are different ways in which the two children tried to determine the right thing to do in this situation. The boy used a calculation in which he weighed and compared values from a neutral, autonomous standpoint. The girl, on the other hand, spoke about the possible effects of the proposed action on the two individuals and their relationships with each other. Her method is not to give the kind of definitive answer that is apparent in the boy's method. When researchers examined this and similar cases of moral dilemma posed to male and a female candidate, they speculated that these differences in moral reasoning may be the result of the sex or gender. Let us delve into another representational example which seems to show a gender difference in moral reasoning. In explaining how they would respond to a moral dilemma about maintaining one's moral principles in the light of peer pressure or family pressure, two teen subjects responded very differently. The case was one in which the religious views of each teen differed from those of their parents. The male said that he had a right to his own opinions and he has a right to differ from his parents, though he respected his parents' views. However, the female candidate said that she was concerned about how her parents would react to her views. So she's concerned about what will be the response of the parents on her taking a stand about her own views. So she says, I understand their fear of parents' fear of my religious ideas. However, she asked, and added, they really ought to listen to me and try to understand my beliefs, and if they do not understand, then the female subject was not very happy about taking her own stand. So she is someone who is really harping on the interrelation between her and her parents and wanting the parents to understand her viewpoint. She concluded that although the male and the female subjects reached similar conclusions in this case, they used different reasonings. They seem to have two decidedly different orientations and perspectives on why they took the stand they took. The male spoke in terms of an individual's right, so more in terms of their own autonomy, their own right assertion and neutrality to his or her viewpoints, while the female talked to the need of the particular people involved to talk with and come to understand one another because they are related to one another, and the female is concerned about what the other person thinks of them. These and similar cases raise questions about whether a gender difference actually exists in the way people reason about moral matters. Now let us look at this chart which I have drawn here from Barbara McNannan's reference. Contrasting pairs of terms can be used to describe female and male ethical perspectives. Now, the female ethical perspectives and the male ethical perspectives, female can go by the point personal, male will be impersonal, female ethical perspective will be partial, males will be impartial, private, public, natural, contractual, feeling, reason, compassionate, fair, concrete, universal, responsibility, rights, relationship, individual, solidarity, autonomy. So this kind of a female ethical perspective, a male ethical perspective has been juxtaposed in several researchers' work, and the various characteristics of values in this list may need further explanation. So there are perspectives and counter perspectives on this kind of an articulation as well. Now first, traditionally from female moral perspective, the context for women's moral decision making is said to be one of relatedness. So remember, the first point was that women have a relatedness as a virtue. Women vis-a-vis autonomy. So women are supposedly more concerned about their particular people and their relations in their life and how they will be affected by some action of theirs. Women's morality is highly personal in nature in that sense. They are partial to their particular loved ones and think that one's primary moral responsibility is to these people whom she cares for. It is the private and the personal natural relations of the family which tie them together. They are friends that are model of other relations which they forge. So women stress the concrete experiences of this or that event and are always concerned about the real harm that might befall particular people or persons due to their actions. So their primary moral obligation is to prevent harm or to help people. Therefore, the supporters of this kind of an essentialism claim that women are able to empathize with others. They are concerned about how they might feel if certain things were to happen to them. They believe that women moral problems can be solved by talking about them, by trying to understand their other people's perspective. The primary moral obligation is not to turn away from those in need. And therefore the ethics of care is a very pertinent way of defining what a woman looks for in terms of interconnectedness. Now, another famous scholar whose book I like to recommend here is Noddings. In her book Caring, a Feminine Approach to Ethics and Moral Education, she brings forward the perspective we have been deliberating today, the perspective of care ethics. Her work provides a good example and further description on this matter. This approach includes an account of how caring relationships are important for the standpoint, for any standpoint to make sense. So she talks about the standpoint of evolution. As a mother's care for her own children promotes their survival. And nobody could have survived ever if there was not a mother's care. So the mother's care promotes their survival and emotional and moral health in terms of the children's brought up. Indeed, Noddings maintains that we all have a natural desire to be cared for, and that we have the ability ourselves to provide care. So that we have the ability to provide care and a desire to be cared for is ground enough to situate our idea of our thesis of care ethics. This is true whether we are male or female, even though evolution and culture tends to make us think that care is more of a female than a male virtue, but it goes true for both the sexes. Noddings emphasizes that care is not a voluntary act of free and equal parties who enter into some social contract. Rather, we find ourselves already embedded in care, like in terms of family, social context that creates networks of care through which we navigate. These networks and relationships are not primarily governed by some abstract rules or principles which have come from above. So you remember in the last discussion on applied ethics, we spoke about top down approach, wherein there are abstract rules which are used to understand a particular situation. Rather, they depend upon the needs and relations of the individuals. Noddings views care as two-sided, which involves a complex interplay between the carer and cared for. Caring is founded in listening attentively, so deep listening is involved, and seeing other person lovingly. It involves what she describes as motivational displacement, where the needs of other overwhelm us, as in a mother's case, where her physical reaction to the crying of her infant child. Noddings thinks that the deep connections of care are psychologically and morally important for human flourishing, and that society would be better off if it promoted caring relationships through education and institutional designs. The supposedly typical male moral perspectives contrast sharply with a feminine perspective on care, like the one which Noddings is suggesting. In this view, men take a more universal and impartial standpoint traditionally in reasoning about what is morally good and bad. Men are more inclined to talk in terms of fairness, justice, and rights as virtues. However, Nodding is talking more in terms of interconnectedness, caring, and deep listening. They ask about the overall effects of some action and what are the good effects. So there is a kind of utilitarian quest underneath. And there's a quest for justice, equality, fairness. When all are considered outweigh the bad, it is as though they think moral decisions ought to be made impersonally or from some unbiased and detached agent. The moral realm would then in many ways be similar to the public domain of law and contract. The law must not be biased and must treat everybody equally. People ought to keep their promises because this is just thing to do and helps a reliable social order. Morality is just a matter of doing one's duty. What are we to make of the view that two different sets of characteristics describe male and female morality then? In suggesting a difference between men's and women's morality, Gilligan has taken aim at one of the dominant points of view about moral development, namely that of psychologist Kohlberg. Kohlberg was influenced by Kantian philosophical tradition as developed by John Rawls. She developed a theory about typical moral development, which she saw to progress from pre-conventional level, where what is seen to matter is pleasing or not offending paternal authority figures through a conventional level in which the child tries to fit in within a group, such as a school community. So from pre-conventional we move to conventional and then to further conforms to the standards and rules to a post-conventional critical realm in which such conventional rules are subjected to tests and where those tests are then of a utilitarian nature. So we'll have to see what Kohlberg's model of moral development is, and this is more influenced by Kantian and Rawlsian principles of justice and fairness. According to Kohlberg, the highest stage of moral development is a stage in which an adult can be governed not only by social pressure but by personal moral principles and sense of justice. Based on these principles, adults come to regard other people as moral equals and manifest an impartial and universal perspective. In his own research, Kohlberg found that women did not often reach the stage of this development. So the women are unable to reach the penultimate stage of development, which is conventionally considered to be a male stage. Women always scored less, and that's why they were morally deficient. So disappointed by such homogenization, Gilligan wondered that there might be different patterns of development in the female subjects, and that's why she conducted those interviews from which we just took two examples to understand how male and female responses towards the same moral standpoint is different when it comes to their moral reasoning. These rights seem to be shared by many young men. The women tended to speak in a different voice about morality itself and about this kind of a situation. I like to end my lecture with a interesting famous psychologist Sigmund Freud, who held that women should, I quote, should show less sense of justice than men, and that they are less ready to submit to the great exigencies of life, that they are more often influenced in their judgments by feelings of affection or hostility. So we can see that this bias when it comes to understand the female perspective exists even in the psychologist's work, Freud's work. According to Freud, women were morally inferior to men. Girls developed a capacity for personal relations and intimacy, while their male counterparts developed a sense of separateness and personal autonomy. The idea was that women based their morality or concern about personal relations on personal, while male bases their morality on rules that can reconcile the separate competing individuals in a society. With this, we come to an end to this lecture, and I am going to continue our discussion on significant challenges which were posed at care ethics perspective to morality in the coming lecture. Thank you.